The wind howls across the ruins of Jericho. Dust rises like ghosts remembering the past. A crimson thread dances in the breeze, the only sign that something holy once happened here. They called her a harlot, but heaven called her chosen. A single rope, a single act of faith, became the thread that wove redemption through generations, all the way to the bloodline of the Messiah himself. But who was Rahab, really? A sinner hiding divine purpose, or a messenger sent to unlock prophecy? Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this one move your heart, make sure to subscribe. Imagine walking through the ancient gates of Jericho, the air thick with dust and incense, the sun bleeding gold over walls so high they seem to touch the sky. The city hums with secret prayers and silent sins. Traders shout near the market, soldiers march on stone roads, and somewhere above the noise a woman watches from her window, her eyes marked by weariness, her spirit burning with something unseen. Her name is Rahab. They called her a prostitute, a woman of shame. But the heavens saw something else, a spark that would soon ignite prophecy. In a city destined for destruction, her house clung to the very walls that would crumble by divine command. Yet through that fragile window hung a scarlet rope, a sign that redemption could bloom even in the shadow of ruin. Rahab's story is more than history. It's a mystery wrapped in mercy. It's the sound of destiny whispering through cracked stones and trembling hearts. Her choice, to hide two strangers from Israel, would not only save her life but alter the course of nations. That single act of courage became a message for every soul condemned by the world yet chosen by God. Imagine her room that night. The torches outside flicker, voices echo down the streets, and the spies she hides beneath flax stalks whisper the words of a coming promise. She does not know the whole prophecy, only the feeling that the God of Israel is not like the gods of Jericho. He sees her, he knows her, and in that knowing she finds something no man ever gave her: worth. For centuries, theologians and mystics have searched for the meaning of Rahab's scarlet rope. Was it mere thread or prophecy incarnate? Some say it foreshadowed the blood of the Lamb, marking her house just as the Passover blood marked the doors in Egypt. Others believe it symbolized the covenant between heaven and the fallen, a divine signature declaring, "This one belongs to me." But what if the mystery runs deeper still? What if Rahab's lineage, leading through generations to King David and finally to Jesus himself, was not coincidence but design? What if her act of faith unlocked something eternal, weaving a scarlet thread through time itself, from the fall of Jericho to the cross at Calvary? We walk through deserts of doubt today, not so different from Rahab's city of fear. Our walls may be digital or emotional, built of pride and pretense. Yet somewhere redemption waits to be tied to our window, a signal to the divine that we still believe. Her story is not just ancient. It is us, broken, seen, redeemed. There is something hauntingly beautiful in how God chose her, the one least expected. Not the priests, not the kings, but a woman rejected by all, standing on a crumbling wall, holding a rope the color of sacrifice. That's how grace moves, quietly through the cracks of human judgment, until it bursts into glory. Some say Rahab's house still whispers in the winds of Jericho, that travelers who stand near the ruins at dusk hear faint echoes of her prayer, a plea for mercy that reached beyond time. Others claim ancient scrolls describe a woman marked by divine fire, whose descendants carried that same unseen flame. Perhaps faith itself is the scarlet rope, fragile, trembling, but strong enough to pull salvation through generations. And so, we begin this journey not as spectators of an old tale, but as seekers of the mystery behind it. Because Rahab's story was never only about a fallen city or a woman's redemption, it was about the nature of divine purpose, how sin can never hide what heaven has already chosen. But what if I told you, the truth was hidden in plain sight all along? The wind of Jericho carried secrets. It slid through narrow streets lined with sandstone walls, fluttered prayer flags, and stirred the smell of spice and sweat from the market below. Every gust seemed to whisper warnings no one could hear, except perhaps one woman who lived where the city met the desert, her window opening to both sin and salvation. Her name was Rahab. Jericho in those days was a jewel of Canaan, rich, fortified, defiant. Its walls stood thick as pride, its gates guarded by men who believed their gods were invincible. But the people inside felt something shifting. News had reached them. An army was coming, a people unlike any other, wanderers who claimed to be guided by a pillar of fire and a cloud by day. The God they served had split seas, drowned kings, and shattered nations. Their march was slow but certain, and each step was an echo of prophecy. Rahab had heard the stories too. From traders, soldiers, drunken guests who stumbled from her door at dawn. They spoke of plagues in Egypt, of waters dividing, of manna falling from heaven. The tales were unbelievable. And yet, deep in her bones, Rahab felt their truth. For nights she couldn't sleep. The walls around her city no longer felt like protection, but a cage about to collapse. She was a woman of the margins, known, desired, yet despised. Men sought her in the shadows, but none spoke her name in daylight. She had learned to wear silence like armor, to move through shame with grace. Her house sat upon the wall, a place between inside and outside, between what was condemned and what was promised. Perhaps that was why heaven chose her. She already lived on the edge of redemption. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, two strangers entered the city. Their clothes were dusty from travel, their eyes sharp and wary. Rahab noticed them from her window. They did not walk like traders nor speak like priests. Something in their silence betrayed purpose. When the city guards began questioning travelers at the gate, she made a choice she could not explain. She opened her door. "Come quickly," she whispered. "The watchmen are searching. You will not be safe outside." The men hesitated, but something in her tone, urgent yet calm, convinced them. Inside her house, the air was thick with the scent of flax and burning oil. She led them up to the roof and hid them beneath stalks drying in the night breeze. Below, footsteps echoed through the streets. Soldiers shouted her name. "Bring out the men who came to you," one demanded at her door. "They are spies from Israel." Rahab steadied her breath. Lies had been her trade for years, but never like this. Not to protect, but to believe. "Yes," she said softly. "They were here, but they left at dusk. If you hurry, you might catch them before the gates close." The guards ran into the dark, their torches fading into the dunes, and for the first time in her life, Rahab felt her heart tremble, not from fear but faith. When she returned to the roof, the two men were waiting, their eyes filled with astonishment. "Why did you help us?" one asked. She looked toward the desert where faint lights burned, the camp of Israel miles away yet somehow near. "Because I know," she said. "I have heard what your God has done. The hearts of my people melt with fear. The Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth below." Her voice cracked with awe. "Swear to me then. When your army comes, spare my family. Give me a sign that we will live." One of the men removed a cord from his garment, crimson against the moonlight. "Tie this in your window," he said. "When the walls fall, this rope will mark your house. Whoever is inside will be saved." A simple token, yet it shimmered like prophecy. The scarlet rope, soft in her hands, radiant in her heart, would become her covenant with a God she did not yet know but already trusted. That night, as she tied the rope through her window, she thought of the blood of lambs she had once seen spilled on Canaanite altars, meaningless sacrifices to deaf idols. But this red thread felt different. It was alive, pulsing with unseen power, somewhere deep within her. She sensed that this symbol reached back to the blood that spared Israel in Egypt, and forward to a sacrifice yet to come, a future redemption written in divine ink. As the spies slipped away under cover of night, Rahab watched them vanish beyond the walls. She felt both fear and peace, the strange calm that comes when destiny begins to unfold. The desert wind carried her whispered prayer, "Remember me." Days passed. The city buzzed with dread. The king ordered more guards. Priests performed desperate rituals to their gods, offering incense and blood in panic. Yet no god answered, only silence. And in that silence, Rahab listened for something greater. A voice not of thunder but of promise. One morning, distant trumpets sounded. Dust rose on the horizon. The Israelites had arrived. Rahab's hands trembled as she touched the scarlet rope, the only mark of hope amid the fear. From her window she saw them, thousands of figures marching in strange, perfect silence. No weapons raised, only priests bearing an ark of gold, and a sound like wind breathing through eternity. For 6 days they circled the city, once each day, never speaking. Jericho's warriors mocked them from the walls, calling them mad. But Rahab felt it, the stillness before divine storm. She kept her family close, their hearts pounding with each trumpet blast. On the seventh day, as the sun burned high, the pattern changed. The Israelites circled 7 times. The horns blew louder, echoing through the valley. Then came the sound, a cry that felt like the breath of creation itself. The ground shook, stones cracked. The mighty walls of Jericho crumbled like sand. But Rahab's house stood. When the dust cleared, her window glowed red with the rope, untouched amid ruin. And through the chaos, she saw the 2 spies returning, not as fugitives this time, but as saviors. They led her and her family to safety, out of the ashes into a new covenant. That moment marked more than survival. It was rebirth. The woman who once sold her body for silver was now written into the bloodline of kings. Through her came Boaz, through Boaz came David, and through David, the Messiah. The rope had become a bridge between disgrace and destiny. And somewhere in the silence after the fall, Rahab understood. Sin cannot bury what heaven has chosen to redeem. The winds of Jericho carried her name that day, not as a curse, but as a promise. A harlot no more, but a herald of salvation. And that's when the prophecy began to unfold. The ruins of Jericho still smoldered when Rahab stepped into the camp of Israel. The air was heavy with dust and wonder, the smell of ash mingling with incense, the murmur of thousands who had seen the impossible. Walls that once mocked heaven now lay in pieces at her feet. Yet among the rubble she stood untouched, wrapped in the scarlet thread that had marked her salvation. But deliverance is never the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new kind of trial, the quiet battle within the soul. She was safe, yes, but she was also a stranger, a Canaanite among Hebrews, a woman with a name that carried whispers, Rahab, the prostitute. The word lingered in the air like smoke no wind could scatter. In the days that followed, she and her family were taken to the edge of the camp. The Israelites obeyed the promise the spies had made. She was alive, yet she lived on the borders once more, neither part of the city she'd betrayed, nor fully of the nation she had joined. She often wondered, had she traded one wall for another? The nights were long in the wilderness. Fires flickered outside her tent, and from afar she could hear the Levites chanting, songs of victory and deliverance. Each note was beautiful but foreign, a melody from a world she did not yet understand. She would close her eyes and whisper the same words she had said before the fall. The Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth below. But this time, the words trembled. Faith was no longer about hiding spies or hanging a rope. It was about waiting, about trusting that the God who spared her once would not abandon her now. Joshua, the leader of Israel, kept his distance. Yet one evening, as the sun sank over the camp, he approached her tent. His face was calm, carved by years of faith and war. You were not chosen by accident, he said. The God who saved you has purpose in every name He spares. You will dwell among us, not as an outsider, but as one covered by the same mercy that covered our fathers. Rahab bowed her head, tears slipping into the dust. But will they ever forget what I was? Joshua's gaze softened. In time they will not remember what you were, but what you became. Those words stayed with her. Yet the human heart forgets slowly. Some women in the camp avoided her eyes. Some men spoke in murmurs when she passed. Her scarlet cord, once a sign of faith, became again in their minds a color of sin. And that was the conflict she carried. She had been redeemed by heaven, yet judged by earth. One night, unable to sleep, Rahab walked beyond the camp toward the silent remains of Jericho. The moonlight touched the broken stones, and in the ruins she saw something gleam, a fragment of the wall that had once held her home. She knelt beside it, running her fingers over the rough edges, and she felt it again. The quiet voice that had stirred her heart before destruction. Your faith is the thread of prophecy, it seemed to whisper. Hold it fast, for through your name the covenant will breathe again. She wept into the sand. The God of Israel was not like the gods she had known. He did not demand incense or sacrifice. He desired trust, a harder offering yet far more sacred. Days turned into weeks. Israel prepared to move forward, to conquer more lands, to fulfill the promise made to their fathers. Rahab's family chose to remain close to her, though fear shadowed them still. They were grateful for life, yet uncertain of what came next. Would they be accepted? Would they be remembered? In the quiet hours before dawn, Rahab began to dream. Strange, luminous visions filled her sleep. Rivers of blood turning into light, children born beneath stars, a throne rising from the desert. She saw a lineage stretching through centuries, kings, prophets, and finally a figure robed in light, carrying a cross that bled gold. She awoke trembling, her heart echoing with a name she did not yet know, but one that heaven had already written in her bloodline. The conflict deepened not with sword or stone, but with revelation. Her heart warred between what she had been told and what she now believed. The Israelites spoke of holiness, of purity and law. She knew those words, but she also knew grace, raw, unearned, burning like fire through her shame. One evening, as the camp quieted, a young man approached her. His name was Salmon, a leader among Judah's tribe. He had watched her in silence since the fall of Jericho. Where others saw scandal, he saw something sacred, a woman unbroken by judgment. "I heard you speak to Joshua," he said softly. "You believe as one born among us, though your gods were many." Rahab looked at him with cautious hope. "Belief doesn't erase what I was," he smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but it transforms what you will be." In that moment, something shifted, not romance, not yet, but recognition. The kind that only souls touched by divine mercy share. Weeks later, Rahab began helping the women of Israel gather flax and weave garments. Her hands that once welcomed sin now worked in service. Her laughter returned, quiet, uncertain but real. Slowly the whispers faded. People began to see her not as Rahab the harlot, but as Rahab the believer, the woman whose scarlet robe had marked the mercy of God. Still, not all peace comes without testing. The memory of Jericho haunted her. She would wake at night hearing the sound of falling walls, the cries of those who perished. Guilt crept into her prayers. "Why me, Lord? Why save me and not them?" One night she ventured again to the ruins, drawn by an ache she couldn't explain. The city was silent now, the stones cold. But as she stood there, a sudden wind rose, fierce, circling her like invisible fire. The sand swirled, and in that storm she felt presence, and not seen but known. "You were not saved to be hidden," the voice murmured within. "You were chosen to reveal the power of faith." What was crimson became covenant. The scarlet rope will stretch through generations, and in the fullness of time it will become the blood of salvation. Rahab fell to her knees, trembling. The divine had spoken again, not through thunder but through the whisper of wind over ruin. She understood then that her life was no longer her own. Her faith was a seed planted in the soil of prophecy. When she returned to the camp, dawn had broken. Salmon waited by the tents, his eyes lifting as she approached. "You've been to the ruins again," he said gently. "I have," she answered, "and I have seen what others cannot. The Lord does not only destroy, he rebuilds. Even from what was unclean." He nodded, understanding, and though neither spoke of it aloud, something deeper than affection began between them. A covenant of souls forged by shared faith. The conflict that had once been fear now became purpose. Rahab no longer saw herself as the woman of Jericho, but as the beginning of a new line, one written not in shame but in scarlet grace. Still, the world would not easily forget her past. In generations to come, her name would still carry both meanings, the sinner and the saint. But perhaps that was her truest legacy, to show that redemption is not the erasure of sin, but its transformation into testimony. And so, as Israel prepared to move forward into new lands, Rahab watched the horizon, her scarlet thread tied around her wrist, a reminder of who she was and who she was becoming. Because sometimes the fiercest battles are not fought with armies, but within the heart that dares to believe it can be made new. And somewhere beyond the desert wind, a prophecy whispered again. The thread had only just begun to weave. The desert slept under a sky full of fire. Stars shimmered above the encampment of Israel like silent witnesses to a story the world was not yet ready to understand. And in the quiet of that sacred night, Rahab dreamed again. This time the vision came clearer than ever before. She saw herself standing before a great river, its waters glimmering like glass and blood at once. On one side were the broken stones of Jericho. On the other, a vast plain flowing with milk and honey. Between them stretched a rope. Her rope, crimson and alive, glowing with a heartbeat of light. It pulsed through the ages, transforming into a stream, then into a line of figures marching through time. Men, women, kings, prophets, and at last, one radiant man bearing a cross. He turned toward her. His face was both sorrow and glory, and when he spoke, the sound was like wind through ancient walls. Your faith was the beginning of my coming. Rahab awoke weeping. The stars outside her tent burned brighter, as if heaven itself was listening. She pressed her palms to the earth, whispering a prayer she could not name. The mystery she had felt in her bones since Jericho's fall was unfolding, and she was standing inside it. From that night forward, Rahab became restless. Each sunrise carried with it new symbols, birds circling over her tent, the scent of burning myrrh drifting from unseen fires, a faint hum in the air like the world holding its breath. She began recording her dreams in lines scratched onto clay fragments. Salmon found them once scattered across her table. You write as though the future is speaking through you, he said. Maybe it is, she answered. Maybe the rope I tied that day never stopped unrolling. He studied her eyes, seeing in them a light that frightened and fascinated him. Then what lies at the end of it? Rahab's voice trembled. A redeemer, one who will hang between heaven and earth, and as my rope once did, to save those marked by faith. Salmon could not reply. The prophecy was too large for his understanding, yet his heart knew it was true. As years passed, Rahab's visions deepened. She began to see symbols everywhere, in the weaving of cloth, in the blood of sacrifices, in the sunrise that split the sky into crimson and gold. She realized that her scarlet rope was more than a sign of safety. It was a covenant of color, the hue of divine mercy, the same color that marked the first Passover, and the same that would someday flow from the Lamb of God. One morning, while helping the women dye fabric for temple garments, Rahab dipped her hands into a basin of red dye. When she lifted them, the color clung to her skin like living flame. In that moment, she understood. Every act of faith leaves a mark that does not fade. That night, she told Salmon what she had seen. The rope was never just for me, she said softly. It was a shadow of something eternal, a thread between human sin and divine forgiveness. He listened, moved by her certainty. Then your faith will not end with you, he said. It will live in our children. Their union was quiet, sacred, sealed not by ceremony but by shared faith. And from it came a son named Boaz, a child born of redemption, carrying the blood of Canaan and the promise of Israel. But the revelation did not stop there. Rahab began teaching her son the mystery of mercy. She told him stories of Jericho, of walls that fell not by strength but by obedience, of a God who saw beyond sin. Remember, she would whisper, every wall you face will fall if you carry faith like a scarlet thread. When Boaz grew older, he would tell the same story to Ruth, another outsider drawn into divine destiny. And through them the lineage of David would rise. Through David the line of the Messiah would be born. The scarlet rope would become a river of blood that flowed straight to Bethlehem. Yet Rahab did not know the full measure of what she had started. She only felt the weight of mystery, heavy, beautiful, unending. In her final years, she often sat at the edge of the camp, gazing at the horizon where Jericho once stood. The ruins had long faded into dust, but she still saw them gleaming in her memory. She remembered the tremor of the earth, the fall of walls, the silence after salvation, and she wondered, how many times would God break and rebuild humanity before they understood his mercy? One evening, as the sun dipped low, a traveling Levite approached her. He had heard the stories, the harlot who became holy, the rope that stopped the wrath of God. He carried with him an ancient scroll. Rahab of Jericho, he said, bowing slightly. We record the wonders the Lord has done among his people. Yours is one of them. But I must ask, why you? Why did he choose your house when the city fell? Rahab smiled faintly. Her eyes, still bright though her hair had turned silver, looked beyond him into the fading light. Because faith doesn't start in temples, she said. It begins where no one is looking. God finds his chosen in the dust, in the shame, in the forgotten. I was all three. The Levite bowed his head, trembling. And the rope? What did it mean? Her fingers brushed the worn thread she still kept beside her bed. It meant he was already weaving redemption long before anyone saw the pattern. That night, the Levite wrote her words into the records of Israel, and thus her name became eternal. But heaven had already inscribed it elsewhere. on the scrolls of grace that reach beyond time. In her final dream, Rahab saw again the man of light from her vision. He stood before her, the same scarlet glow flowing from his hands. Behind him, the walls of every city and heart trembled and fell. She fell to her knees and whispered, "Now I see." He smiled, "And now you are home." When morning came, the camp was still. The first light touched the edge of her tent, turning it crimson. Salmon found her at peace, the rope clutched gently in her fingers, a faint smile on her lips. They buried her on the edge of the valley, halfway between Jericho and the promised land. The wind sang softly through the reeds, carrying her story like a hymn, that no sin is too dark, no past too ruined for God to turn it into prophecy. Generations later, when scholars traced the lineage of the Messiah, they found her name, Rahab of Jericho, woven into the line of kings. Her faith, her rope, her redemption, all became symbols of divine continuity. The prostitute had become a prophetess, the rope had become revelation, and the scarlet thread of grace still winds through time, binding heaven and earth, reminding all who fall that faith is not found in perfection, but in trust. The desert wind moves through the ruins still, whispering her name through the centuries. It carries her message to those who will listen. The rope still hangs from your window. Reach for it. The promise still stands. And somewhere in the silence between the stars, the same crimson light burns, the mark of a faith that outlived walls, cities, and centuries. The story of Rahab did not end in Jericho. It became the story of every soul who ever dared to believe that redemption can bloom in the most unlikely places. And with that revelation, the scarlet prophecy began to pulse again, alive, eternal, unbroken. The horns of Jericho were not the sound of war, they were the echo of judgment. For 6 days, the Israelites marched around the city, silent except for the shuffle of sandals on dust and the low hum of anticipation. From her window, Rahab watched, her scarlet rope trembling in the wind like a living pulse. Each dawn they came again, circling silent, patient. Each dusk they left, leaving behind a city that grew more restless, more terrified. Inside Jericho's stone heart, panic festered like a wound. The king's advisors whispered that Rahab had betrayed them. Soldiers were sent to her door, their fists pounding, demanding explanations. But Rahab said nothing. She simply touched the crimson rope, her only covenant with the unseen God. They called her a traitor, a curse, a harlot with delusions of holiness. Yet deep within, she felt the stir of something divine, the trembling of destiny beneath her floorboards. By the seventh dawn, the sky turned the color of brass. The air was thick with dust, heat, and fear. On that final day, the Israelites circled not once, but 7 times. Each rotation felt heavier, charged with unseen fire. The priests lifted the ram's horns. And then, as if heaven itself inhaled, the world held its breath. The sound that followed shattered more than walls. It shattered centuries of pride. Jericho's mighty ramparts cracked like clay pots. The towers crumbled into clouds of ruin. People screamed, running through collapsing streets, searching for shelter where none remained. The earth itself seemed to roar, not in rage but in revelation. For the first time, Jericho trembled before the living God. Inside her small house built into the wall, Rahab knelt. Dust rained from the ceiling. Her heart pounded. She gathered her family close, her father, her mother, her brothers. "Do not move," she whispered. "Do not let go of hope." The walls around them groaned, splitting, falling, yet her house stood still, untouched, held up by invisible hands. The scarlet rope swayed gently outside the window, glowing faintly through the dust, like a line drawn between heaven and earth. Outside, chaos reigned. The Israelites stormed the city, fire and fury unleashed upon stone and sin alike. But when the 2 spies returned, the ones she had hidden, they remembered her. They found Rahab's house standing amid the ruins, just as promised. They led her and her family out, covering their faces as they passed through the smoke of judgment. The city of Jericho, once proud and impenetrable, was gone. The harlot's home remained. When Rahab stepped onto the plains beyond the rubble, she looked back one last time. The scarlet rope still hung in her window, now framed by destruction but untouched. It looked almost alive, fluttering in divine approval. The sun broke through the dust clouds, its light catching the red cord like fire. That moment, that rope, it became more than a symbol of rescue. It became prophecy, because the rope wasn't just the mark of her salvation, it was the shadow of blood yet to come. The same red that spared her home would one day run down a wooden cross, sparing the world. Rahab, the prostitute of Jericho, had unknowingly mirrored the mystery of redemption itself. But even after her deliverance, her struggle wasn't over. When the Israelites looked at her, they saw a foreigner, a woman with a scandalous past. Many whispered she had no place among the chosen. Yet Joshua, their leader, declared her protected, chosen by God's will. She was given a home among the people of Israel, though suspicion lingered like smoke. Nights in the camp were long. Rahab often sat outside her tent staring at the stars, the same stars once promised to Abraham, father of nations. Could she, a Canaanite woman, be part of that promise? She didn't know yet that through her womb, kings would come, even the Messiah himself. But heaven knew, and heaven waited. Still old voices haunted her. When she closed her eyes, she could hear Jericho's laughter, the jeers, the shame, the endless reminders of what she had been. A harlot cannot be holy, the echoes said. A sinner cannot be chosen. But Rahab remembered the night the spies came, how faith had burned brighter than fear. She had chosen belief over safety, truth over survival. That choice had rewritten her destiny. In the stillness, she whispered, "Your mercy is greater than my past." Each sunrise after that, she watched the Israelites build, pray, and move forward. She joined them in their rituals, learning their songs, their laws, their ways of holiness. She no longer traded secrets for silver, she traded her shame for purpose. And though she didn't yet understand how vast her redemption was, her heart knew this. She was no longer who she used to be. But the story of Rahab's faith didn't end with the fall of Jericho. In fact, it was only the beginning of a mystery that would echo across centuries. The red rope had become more than a sign of rescue. It was a thread of divine continuity, stretching from a fallen city to a cross yet to be raised. Every generation that followed carried that thread, through Boaz, her son who would marry Ruth the Moabite, through David, her descendant, who would rise as king, and ultimately through Jesus, who would hang upon wood marked by blood as scarlet as Rahab's rope. The prostitute of Jericho had become the grandmother of grace. Yet the question still lingers, whispered by wind over ancient ruins. Why Rahab? Why choose a sinner to save the sacred? Perhaps because redemption shines brightest through the cracks of human imperfection. Perhaps because God hides divine purpose within the hearts least expected to carry it. As Rahab walked among the Israelites, once an outcast, now reborn, the desert winds carried the faint sound of collapsing walls fading into silence. The land had changed, so had she, but somewhere deep within a prophecy stirred again, when quiet but undeniable. The scarlet rope wasn't finished speaking, and that's when the prophecy began to unfold. Centuries pass, yet the dust of Jericho still whispers. Beneath layers of sand and ruin, the stones remember the tremor of collapsing walls, the trembling faith of a woman who defied her fate. Archaeologists call it legend. The faithful call it prophecy. And if you walk those ruins today beneath the weight of sun and silence, you might still feel it, a pulse faint but unbroken, like the memory of a scarlet rope swaying in eternal wind. The story of Rahab did not end when the city fell. It was only buried, waiting for those with eyes to see what God had hidden in plain sight. Because the fall of Jericho was not only a battle of nations, it was a revelation of patterns, the way heaven moves through weakness, the way divine promise threads itself through the most unlikely souls. In the generations that followed, Rahab's name appeared again, whispered in genealogies etched in sacred text. Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab, the scrolls would later record. A single line in parchment, but a chasm of meaning beneath it. Boaz, son of the redeemed, would become the husband of Ruth, another outsider, another woman of forbidden lineage who found grace. Their union was no accident. It was continuation. It was the unseen hand of God writing redemption into the bloodline of kings, and through them, through the wombs once considered unworthy, came David, the shepherd who would become king, the flawed poet who sang to God in both sin and surrender. Through David's seed came Solomon. Through Solomon's generations later came Jesus, the Redeemer, whose blood ran red as Rahab's rope. That crimson thread had become prophecy fulfilled. The scarlet cord that marked Rahab's salvation foreshadowed the blood that would mark humanity's, but the mystery deepened still. Because some believed that Rahab's house, the one that stood when all others fell, was built on the western wall of Jericho, where the ruins now bear traces of something strange. In 1907, archaeologists unearthed a section of wall still standing amid the rubble, its foundation intact. The rest of the city had fallen outward, but that single segment had not. They wrote it off as coincidence, a quirk of ancient engineering. Yet believers saw something else. They saw preservation. They saw proof of a promise kept. That fragment of wall, weathered but unbroken, is said to have stood exactly where the crimson cord once hung. And if you stand there now as dusk paints the stones red with the dying light, you can almost imagine it. A thread, glowing faintly, stretching across centuries. But Rahab's legacy is not bound to ruins. It lives in the unseen. Every time someone condemned by the world finds mercy, her story breathes again. Every time faith outweighs fear, the scarlet thread is pulled through another heart. Because the rope was never just fabric, it was covenant, a physical sign of a spiritual law. That faith, not bloodline, is what binds us to the divine. Perhaps that is why her name appears not just in the Old Testament, but in the New. Centuries later, in the Epistle of James, she is remembered not for her sin, but for her faith. Was not Rahab the harlot justified by works when she received the messengers? And in Hebrews, she stands among the heroes of belief. By faith, Rahab perished not with them that believed not. In a scroll filled with patriarchs, prophets, and kings, her name gleams like a jewel. A woman once shamed by men, now honored by heaven. But hidden within her story is one more mystery, a whisper that some theologians call the Scarlet Prophecy. It is said that every act of redemption in Scripture carries within it the seed of Christ's coming, and Rahab's rope hanging from her window mirrored the blood that would one day drip from the wood of Calvary, a public sign that salvation had come, not for the perfect, but for the repentant. Some rabbis taught that the rope was not only a signal to the Israelites, but a message to God, a cry of repentance written in color. Scarlet was the hue of sin, yet it became her shield. As Isaiah would later write, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow." Rahab's cord was both confession and covenant, a symbol of humanity's plea and heaven's answer. But what became of the rope? No scripture records it. No relic was preserved. Yet legends from early Christian mystics tell of a family in Bethlehem who kept a length of red thread passed down through generations, said to have belonged to a woman from Jericho. The story claims it was woven into temple veils, dyed again and again, its origins forgotten but its meaning lingering, a silent testimony of salvation. Whether myth or miracle, the symbolism remained, red for mercy, red for covenant, red for redemption, and so Rahab's scarlet thread runs invisibly through time, through the Exodus, through the prophets, through Bethlehem's stable. The prostitute of Jericho had become the first strand in a tapestry that ends in eternity. Even now, when theologians trace the bloodline of Jesus, they stop and wonder at her name, Rahab, the woman who stood between destruction and deliverance. In her window hung the same truth that would one day hang on the cross, that faith can rewrite destiny. But here is the mystery many overlook. Rahab was not simply spared from destruction. She was transformed for purpose. In the silence after Jericho's fall, when she stepped into a new nation, she carried with her not just gratitude but prophecy. Her survival itself became the pattern of salvation, a fallen soul redeemed, brought into divine lineage, and made a vessel of eternal promise. The book of Joshua ends with her story quietly concluded, but heaven never stopped writing it. Because Rahab's redemption was not a moment war, it was a mirror. It reflects every human heart that dares to believe that God's mercy is greater than their past. Somewhere, beyond history, the scarlet rope still swings in the unseen wind, a bridge between sin and salvation, a reminder that no wall is too high for grace to climb, no soul too lost for light to reach. And if you listen closely while among in prayer, in silence, in the echo of Scripture, you might still hear it, the sound of walls falling, and the whisper of a woman once called sinner, now called redeemed. The ruins of Jericho lie still, but her story moves, through time, through prophecy, through every believer who clings to unseen hope. And that's when the final revelation begins to stir. The night was silent over the ruins of Jericho, centuries gone yet still alive in the breath of wind that moved between broken stones. The stars burned cold, ancient watchers of a covenant older than kings. Somewhere beneath that silent sky, in the dust of forgotten walls, the scarlet thread still whispered, "If you listen long enough, you realize it never truly stopped swaying." For the story of Rahab was never just about a city's fall or a sinner's salvation. It was a revelation, hidden inside history like light behind a veil. Her rope was not just a sign for Israel to spare her home. It was a prophecy stitched into time itself, a symbol that divine grace would one day descend upon the unworthy and lift them into eternity. In the shadow of Jericho's collapse lay the pattern of humanity. Pride built high, faith buried deep, walls rising against truth. And in that same moment, within one trembling house marked by Scarlet, lay the pattern of redemption, surrender, belief, and salvation through blood. The color red has always carried the weight of heaven's most mysterious language. It is the color of sacrifice, of covenant, of cleansing through paradox. When Rahab hung that rope, she declared something her mind could not yet comprehend, that only through crimson could creation be restored. Her faith in that moment was not intellect. It was revelation. Thousands of years later, another red mark would appear, not on stone but on wood. Not on the walls of Jericho but on the beams of a cross. The scarlet rope that once fluttered in desert wind became the blood that ran down a Savior's wrists. The same hue, the same mercy, the same pattern. When Christ was crucified, heaven drew a line straight through time, from Rahab's window to Golgotha's hill. The first was the promise. The second was the fulfillment. Both stood between destruction and deliverance. Both declared that faith, not worthiness, is what brings salvation. And if you trace the lineage, the connection becomes almost divine poetry. Rahab, the outcast of Jericho, became the ancestor of Jesus, not symbolically but by blood. Her faith became flesh in the Son of Man. Her scarlet rope became his scarlet cross. The very lineage of the Redeemer was birthed from the womb of redemption itself. What is this if not the fingerprint of prophecy? It is said that when God writes a story, he hides himself in symbols, so that only those who seek him will see. Rahab's scarlet thread was one of those divine riddles, a parable in motion. To the world, it was a rope. To heaven, it was a covenant, a declaration that no sin could overshadow divine intention. Some ancient rabbis believed that Rahab's window faced west, toward the setting sun, the direction of death and rebirth. In that too, the symbol breathes. For every sunset is a prophecy of resurrection, light swallowed, then reborn. The scarlet rope catching the last fire of dusk became unknowingly the first light of dawn for humanity. The prophets later spoke of it in fragments. Isaiah with his words of scarlet sin turned white as snow. Hosea with his vision of a harlot redeemed and wedded anew. Jeremiah with his cry that God writes his covenant not on stone but upon the heart. Each echo traces back to that window in Jericho, where a sinner first dared to believe that mercy could find her. And in that belief, the universe shifted, because faith is not just belief in what will happen, it is alignment with what already is. Rahab stepped into divine timing. She opened her door to messengers not of man, but of destiny. Her act rewove the human story. Through her, God revealed that the gates of heaven swing open not through perfection, but through surrender. The ancient scrolls say that when the Israelites entered the promised land, the ground was soaked in the dust of fallen walls, and but one family walked through untouched, eyes lifted, breath trembling. Imagine it. Rahab, barefoot among ruin, holding her mother's hand, the scent of fire and stone heavy in the air. Behind her, a world of sin collapsing. Before her, a promise unfolding. That moment was both ending and beginning, the death of an old world, and the birth of a covenant that would one day redeem all creation. And perhaps this is the secret hidden beneath her story, that God often chooses the broken to rebuild the holy. That divine purpose hides best in imperfection. That the scarlet rope, once a mark of shame, became the color of salvation, because grace is not about who deserves it, but who dares to receive it. There is a reason her name stands alongside Abraham's in the Book of Faith. Both believed what they could not see. Both obeyed without proof. and both became vessels of promises that outlived them by millennia. The ruins of Jericho stand today, silent, skeletal, haunted by wind. But perhaps they remain not as ruins of wrath but as reminders of revelation, each stone fallen outward, as though even the walls themselves bowed before the power of faith. And somewhere among them, the faint echo of a scarlet thread reminds the world that grace once stood against the impossible and did not fall. In every generation, God weaves the same pattern again, through the repentant heart, through the humble spirit, through the quiet act of faith that no one sees. The scarlet thread continues binding heaven and earth, sinner and saint, past and prophecy. Perhaps that is why Christ's final words, "It is finished," carried the same breath as Rahab's silent prayer. Because the pattern was complete. The circle had closed. The scarlet had spoken. And now, when the wind moves through the desert of Jericho, when dust swirls over the old stones and the sun burns the horizon blood red, the silence feels holy. As if the land itself remembers the woman who believed before she understood, the prostitute who became prophecy, the sinner who became a mother of salvation, the scarlet that became the savior. Rahab's story is not history, it is revelation, a divine whisper that still calls to every heart that feels unworthy. Your past does not disqualify you. It prepares you. And so the thread continues. From her window to the cross, from the cross to every heart that dares to believe. The rope is no longer fabric. It is faith itself, stretched across eternity, unbroken. And in that unbroken silence, one truth gleams like fire in the night. The walls of sin fall when faith stands firm, and redemption once begun never ends. The wind quiets over the desert. The echoes of Jericho fade into memory, and all that remains is stillness, the kind that feels like prayer. The stones lie scattered, but their silence speaks. It tells of a God who rewrites the destinies of those the world rejects. It whispers the name of a woman who dared to believe when faith seemed foolish, whose rope of red became a bridge between ruin and redemption. Rahab's story does not end in rubble. It lives in every soul that has ever stood on the edge of collapse, trembling between fear and faith. She was not pure, not noble, not chosen by status or lineage. Yet her name is remembered not for what she was, but for what she became. Because when heaven looked down upon Jericho, it did not see walls and armies. It saw one heart ready to surrender. And that was enough. That is the quiet power of faith. It moves unseen, like wind through the ruins, shaping the course of eternity. Rahab's scarlet rope still glows in the story of humankind. Every time we reach for grace we think we don't deserve, we pull on that same thread. Every time we choose truth over comfort or hope over despair, we hang that same crimson sign upon our window. For the scarlet rope was never meant to stay in Jericho. It was meant to be carried, from generation to generation, woven through the hearts of believers, binding the fallen to the divine. The rope is us, our failures, our prayers, our trembling acts of courage, Mari. All of them are cords reaching toward heaven. Some frayed, some fading, but still held fast by mercy. And though we live in a world of noise, power, and pride, not so different from Jericho, the lesson remains the same. The strongest walls can fall in an instant, but one thread of faith can outlast them all. When you look at Rahab's story through the lens of prophecy, you begin to see the hidden map of grace. From the harlot's window to the carpenter's cross, God's message never changed. The blood that marked Rahab's house marked the world. The sign of faith that saved her family became the promise that would save creation. But there is another secret in her redemption, one that speaks to our own time. Rahab's act of faith did not erase her past. It transformed it. Her brokenness became the soil from which salvation grew. The very thing that disqualified her in the eyes of men qualified her in the eyes of God. And so it is with us. The wounds we hide, the shame we carry, the parts of our story we wish to forget, these become, in the hands of grace, the proof of divine authorship. Because redemption does not erase our past. It reveals why it mattered. When Rahab walked out of Jericho, she carried more than her family. She carried the blueprint of resurrection. She showed that faith could bloom in the heart of anyone, even among the ashes of a fallen city. Her life became the first page of a new covenant, written not with ink, but with blood, Scarlet as her rope. And perhaps that is the eternal purpose of her story. To remind us that divine purpose hides in the most unlikely places. In sinners. In ruins, in moments of trembling belief. So the next time you feel forgotten, unworthy, or too far gone, remember the woman on the wall. Remember the scarlet rope trembling against the wind, defying destruction. Remember that God's light often shines brightest through the cracks of shame, through the broken stories we try to hide. Rahab's faith teaches that holiness is not about perfection, it's about trust. It's the courage to believe in unseen mercy, to act upon a whisper from heaven when the world demands proof. That is why her name stands not among the condemned, but among the redeemed. Her story is a promise. No life is beyond grace. No soul beyond rescue, no ruin beyond rebuilding. In every age, we still hang our scarlet ropes, sometimes in words, sometimes in silence, sometimes in the trembling act of hope when everything else has fallen. And each time heaven sees, heaven remembers, heaven redeems. The ruins of Jericho may crumble to dust, but the thread remains, bright, unbroken, eternal. For the God who saw Rahab still sees us. The same mercy that spared her house still moves through time, through faith, through every heart that dares to believe. And when history itself collapses, and when the last wall falls in silence, returns to the earth, perhaps there will still be one thread shining in the wind, scarlet, unfading, eternal, the sign that faith was here, and that grace, as always, had the final word. And that was the story of Rahab, the woman the world called unworthy, but heaven called chosen. If this story touched your heart, if you saw the beauty hidden in her scarlet thread, then remember this: your past does not disqualify you from your purpose. Sometimes it becomes the very bridge that leads others to salvation. If you felt that, take a moment, like this video, share it, and subscribe to Naptime Stories for more untold mysteries of the Bible. Every week we uncover the hidden faith, emotion, and divine secrets behind the ancient names you thought you already knew. And now I want to hear from you. What does Rahab's scarlet rope mean to you? Redemption? Protection? Or something even deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay faithful, and remember, sometimes the smallest act of faith can rewrite generations.